Crisis negotiators, I think, are fabulous in teaching interpersonal relationships, HR, conflict resolution between leaders, between a boss and a subordinate, whatever it may be. There's some fabulous techniques that work there. They really don't work between a buyer and a seller, not nearly as well anyway, as buy and sell techniques, B2B techniques, which, by the way, don't translate into hostage negotiating or crisis negotiating.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Inman. Mike is managing partner at TableForce, which is a negotiation training company. So Mike is a negotiation trainer. But one of the things that struck me is that on his LinkedIn profile, Mike is very deliberate about the fact he is not a crisis negotiator. So Mike, welcome first up.
Yeah. Thank you, Fred. Thank you for having me.
And tell me, why are you so deliberate about not being a crisis negotiator?
Yeah, so here, let me explain how I discovered this significant difference. On LinkedIn, a lot of people try to link in. They're trying to build their networks, get a lot of followers and things like that. When someone tries to connect with me, I always say, send them a message, say the same thing. Thank you for reaching out. How may I be of service? I want to show you a little work before you get into my network of people so that you're willing to work for it. So this gentleman reached out, tried to connect. Scott Tillum was his name, very well known in the negotiation space now. This is about 2 years ago. He reached out and he said, I'm a crisis negotiator. I've just retired. I'm entering the speaker circuit. And business negotiations are so different than crisis negotiations. It's fascinating. I'd like to learn more. And the voice in my head said, huh? What do you mean it's different? It's negotiations. And then I started to research it and study it and learn the very important differences between a crisis negotiator and a business negotiator. Don't hear something I'm not saying. I'm not disparaging either part of the craft. In fact, crisis negotiators, that's the highest form of the craft. You're negotiating over a human life. Business is just dollars, pounds, right? But negotiating, talking somebody off of a bridge, getting someone released. I mean, just think of the pressure. I've been in some pressure negotiations. And by the way, they're not all pressure negotiations. A lot of people like to think of all these high stakes pressure C-suite negotiations. No, most of the negotiations in a business are very, I'll say, transactional based, but are working level based. And so I started to see these differences. And Kel Jensen, another person in the space, highly regarded, Kel says, if somebody's in a crisis at 3 a.m., I don't want that phone call. And I'm that way too. I know techniques. I've read them and researched them, but you can't learn to swim by reading a book. You've maybe heard that saying.
Yeah.
I've never talked someone off a bridge, and I don't want there to be a first time. Emotionally, I don't know if I could do it. I tear up over emotional stories. So I try to tell people I'm not that. And yes, I am signaling to people that there's a difference. That same aha moment that I had when I say I'm not a crisis negotiator, I want people to think, what do you mean? What does he mean by that? And to think for themselves so that they can come up with their own solution and their own, compartmentalization. We all go into these tribes, right? A right and a left. So figure out what tribe you're in and figure out what tribe you want to be in and figure out who you want to learn from. Crisis negotiators, I think, are fabulous in teaching interpersonal relationships, HR, conflict resolution between leaders, between a boss and a subordinate, whatever it may be. There's some fabulous techniques that work there. They really don't work between a buyer and a seller, not nearly as well anyway, as buy and sell techniques, B2B techniques, which, by the way, don't translate into hostage negotiating or crisis negotiating.
Well, essentially, elephant in the room, because we can split the difference. And it might
Absolutely.
be a good idea.
Hey, if Chris Ross,
absolutely the thing to do.
If Chris brings home an arm, that's a bad day for everybody.
Still
Right,
worked.
right. Yeah, we're laughing about it, but that's a really bad day.
Yeah.
He cannot split the difference. He has to bring home 100% of the person, and he has to bring home 100% of them. So yeah, he's not in a position to split the difference in purchasing buy sell transactions. And I tell people, don't get in the habit of splitting the difference, because that's math. Let's just split the difference. And B, it encourages bad behavior. For example, if I want to meet at 5 and my boss wants to meet at 6, split the difference at 5:30, right?
Yeah.
But in my head, I will say, aha, he's a split the difference guy. So the next time we get together, I'll say to my boss, hey, when do you want to meet? And he'll say 6. And I'll say, how about 4? And now the middle is 5 and I win, right?
Yeah.
But my boss is really smart. And his voice will say, I see what you did and I'm going to get you back. And then the next time we get together, he'll say, hey, Mike, when do you want to meet? And I'll say 4. And he'll say 7. And now we get in this fight, and the two sides get further and further apart. So splitting the difference can be unhealthy, but there are exceptions in business. And what I tell people is, have it be on something small and late in the deal, not on a big deal point early, because the other side will recognize you're a split the difference person and take more and more assertive positions. It could be payment terms. You've got 68 pages of terms and conditions done in a high-tech IT agreement, and one side wants 30 days and the other side wants 60 days. So you split the difference at 45. There are exceptions, but make them small and late on a business deal so the other side doesn't use that against you earlier in the deal. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely it does. Yeah, you condition people in the way that they're going to behave with you. You just encourage anchoring and all that good stuff.
We say we teach people how to treat us, and then what works well, they'll continue to use, and what doesn't work well, they'll hopefully stop using so much.
Yeah, but it is popular at the moment, isn't it? I don't know, what do we call it? Do we call it the Voss approach? Do we call it difference approach? Do we call it? I'm not kind of sure of the name.
It goes back to Jim Camp
approach.
Don't get me started on that.
Fred, it's a podcast. I'm the host. It's my job.
But here's my take. When you say tactical empathy, or when you say, again, don't hear something I'm not saying, we should all be more empathetic. We should all be more willing to understand the other side's sheet of paper and to think about it and to consider it when we're negotiating. Totally get it. But when you describe it as tactical empathy, what I'm hearing is it's really more important that you're doing it to create leverage, to win the negotiation, to get 100% of the hostage. So it's not authentic empathy. It's fake empathy, because you're doing it for the sole purpose of doing better in that negotiation. You're not doing it because you actually do care. You're doing it so the other side thinks you care. And those are different things to me.
Is the popularity then of that book in that some of these concepts like tactical empathy, like mirror words, they're things which have been around a long time. Let's face it, it's not new, but they're packaged nicely. There's a sexy story around them, and they're sort of given that label, or labeling, another one.
Sure.
And so it's very easy to get your head around. Oh, that's a thing. I can use that thing, and I can use it to win. And then, is that what it is?
Well, there is that. It's simple. It's chunked out. It sounds very good, and it's valid in certain contexts. But let me give you an example. This happened to me online. A crisis negotiator was talking about, someone had mentioned to them, is negotiations just manipulation? And they kind of took offense to their friend saying, is it manipulation? Now, if you look up the definition of manipulation, it can be a negative thing, but it can also be a positive thing. You know how to manipulate, you know how to use something, you're a craftsperson, you know how to make something work. So manipulation can also be a positive, depends on how you want to take it. I jumped in and was interacting, and because of my LinkedIn title that says not a crisis negotiator, I believe they started off a little adversarial, or at least that's what I felt their words were doing. And I pushed back, and they said, it seems like you have a problem with crisis negotiators. And my immediate response was, that's called labeling. And you didn't know that I know what it is. Because to a crisis negotiator who shows up on the scene at 3 a.m., the person on the bridge has likely doesn't have a lot of experience negotiating, and they've probably never taken a class or read a book on negotiating. Okay, so a crisis negotiator is used to dealing with people who are in an irrational state and have no experience at all. Therefore, the tools and techniques that they can use are much more effective, labeling, mirroring, very highly effective with those type of people. People in business do read books. We do see it all the time. Anytime a new sales technique comes out on LinkedIn, hey, salespeople, this is a way to get people to open your emails. I get it in my feed. I read it. And oh, by the way, as a buyer, I might interact with 7 or 8 salespeople in a week. And by the time the third person uses the same technique, I go, oh, geez, here's another salesperson using the same damn technique. So what happens is we become so process focused, and the FBI, they are very process focused. They don't deviate, right? They operate from a position of can't lose, can't risk. Business negotiators take risks all the time. So we approach negotiations very differently. The crisis people, process focused, dealing with somebody who hasn't negotiated before versus somebody who's seen a couple of negotiations, time or two. And therefore, the techniques are very different that you would need to use on someone with experience than somebody who hasn't had experience. Did that answer your question?
No, it does. It's because I've been fascinated as to, I think the popularity is because it's nicely packaged and the sexy stories and the rest of it. But what I wanted to talk to you about is what actually works.
Yeah.
And kind of in the B2B world, because that's who's listening. We're talking, talking salespeople, we're talking sales directors. And it's
let me explain what went through my head. There's the voice in all of our heads that we have. So let me tell you what the voice in my head said. When she said it seems like, I went, that's funny. Right? That you think I'm just gonna all of a sudden just be like open up to you and we have this relationship. There's a risk that I could have taken offense. How dare you not know that I know what you're doing? That you're now trying to trick me, and I don't like to be tricked. Now, I happen to think it was humorous, but there was a risk in the business world that the buyer could have said, you're trying to trick me. I don't like you. I don't want to have a relationship with you because you're not authentic. Because that's the way buyers think sometimes. Buyers are highly suspicious of salespeople. Fred, no disrespect to your profession. But there's a lot of bad salespeople that have ruined it for the good salespeople of the world. So buyers are always on alert. Is this person authentic or are they lying to me? What's going on? They're probably not telling me the truth. Buyers are just suspicious by nature. Again, I don't like to stereotype, but it comes with the job to be a little bit suspect. Yeah. Right? So then when I catch you using a technique that I believe is more trickery, manipulation than it is authentic, I'm going to go, that Fred, he's another salesperson, just using another technique. Versus if you are authentic to me, if I do build out a profile that says, no, Fred, I can trust him. Now you've built a relationship. Does that resonate? Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I'm sort of reflecting on, how do I train salespeople to negotiate? And that's only a small part of the whole sales training that I do. You specialize in this stuff. And I do tend to shy away from techniques because I have this concept that, we've got limited, or maybe it's myself, I've got this limited processing power in my head. And if I'm spending all of that on trying to get to the technique right, I'm actually just not doing the basics right, which is trying to get an agreement, which is beneficial for both of us. And by concentrating on that and thinking about the outcomes for both parties and how we're actually going to apply this stuff and use it, that seems to be a better use of time and effort, and just be genuine about that. And we are, because that's where we've got to, rather than, must remember to use late night DJ voice because when I get excited, I speak too quickly. And well, speak fast, get excited, Fred, because you're excited about the impact this is going to have on somebody. So yeah, let's work around that. And so
but take that technique, late night radio DJ voice. That's perfect for when a person is in an irrational state. Their brain is firing. You got all sorts of hormones. Everything's going on in their brain, and you're just trying to get them. You're just trying to get them to slow their thinking down. And so naturally you do it, whether you label it as late night radio DJ voice or not. It's absolutely a highly effective technique, and that's why it's in books and it's very interesting to read about. But if you did that to me, if you're a salesperson, you wouldn't know, Mike, let me tell you about price. I'd be like, Fred, are you trying to come on to me?
Fred, we've been talking for 3 months. You talk fast and you get excited very quickly. What's going on with you? Are you okay? Should I call an ambulance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, no, there is a time to use
Yeah.
that technique that Phil, we
Yeah.
did with Phil, like pause, consider, respond.
Yeah.
But when you do it in an inauthentic way, I think people are very good at reading each other. They're not always good at painting the full picture, but there's a feeling they get when someone's being authentic versus a feeling they get when someone's not being authentic. And they can't always articulate why, but I think we're a summation of the experience we have with somebody. And it's much better to be authentically you than it is to be the best fake someone else.
Because when a lot of the tactics, a lot of the techniques are about style, aren't they? Whereas for me, again, and looking for your guidance on this, before you start messing about with that stuff, you've got to have good, solid structure. Get your prep right. Understand what your BATNA is. Understand what they might be trying to achieve. Think about all these variables that you could be using. Spend more time thinking about that stuff. And well, you'll get to the agreement because you can use those better than
Absolutely.
trying to, I want to do all the funky moves. Again, that's my take on it.
I agree. So having that BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, if I'm negotiating a deal with HubSpot for CRM, a professional buyer will have looked at Salesforce and several other CRMs that are out there, and they'll understand the market. Like no other time in history, buyers can get access to information. Buyers no longer have to wait for a salesperson to call on them and make presentations. Buyers can go get all this stuff for very low cost, very quickly, very comprehensive information that's out there. So if HubSpot thinks that they've got this great relationship with the internal user community and we've had several trials, so we're just going to jam them with a really high price, we've got them. If I, as the buyer, know that I can go to Salesforce and I know what approximately their pricing is, I may not have negotiated the final agreement, but I know kind of where we are in the process, and that's my BATNA. If I don't go with you, I'm going to go with them. You can negotiate with a lot of confidence, knowing that I have an alternative. That's another thing that a person on a bridge really, they don't have a good alternative, right? In fact, a crisis negotiator educated me because they have a 94% success rate. Now, there is no salesperson on the planet that has a 94% success rate. There might be a unicorn out there. You may know them. Maybe you teach them. But now buyers might have a 94% success rate because of the 5 suppliers that I had bid, I'm going to award business to one of them and likely to the one that I really want. The likelihood I have to take my BANTA is low, but still 94% is amazing. So this crisis negotiator said, do you know why it's so high, Mike? And I said, because you're really good and you're trained at what you do. And he said, yeah, but think about it this way. The person who calls the crisis line has already signaled, I want to get to yes. I want someone to talk me out of something that's horrible. They've signaled the other side. It's a question of when, not if. As long as you do your job right, I'm probably going to calm down. I'm probably going to rethink this. So the person is preconditioned to get to yes as soon as they pick up the phone. And I thought, oh, now I understand more about that vertical of negotiating.
Yeah. Because again, if we're negotiating in B2B, it's because we do want an agreement, but the agreement can just look so different. Go back to the CRM. It could be that, I'm trying to sell you the CRM for your whole business. And because of the way it's going, it's, well, yeah, I have to use it for that division. But I'm only going to give you for that division because my hands are tied in that. But the other
you've got a
5
VP,
divisions, I could go somewhere else.
You got a VP of sales who has a favorite who used it at their previous company at one division, and you got a different VP of sales at a different division who has a favorite because they used something different at a different, and then the purchasing in the middle is we really need one system. We don't want these systems talking. We want to have one truth, but they're VPs and they want what they want. So then purchasing will negotiate, will broker a deal. Been a part of lots of these. Let's have a trial. We're going to do 1-year trials at each division. And at the end of the day, we're going to have a corporate agreement, whichever one produces the better result. So now when I negotiate with HubSpot and Salesforce, I'm going to dangle the carrot, but I'm going to build in, you're going to get one division, but I want to know the pricing and terms if in a year you get the whole thing. Because what I don't want to do is go with them for 1 year, and at the end of the year go, hey, that was really great. We're going to give you the enterprise. So now what's it going to cost? Because now the price goes up. So I'm going to lock in an enterprise deal based on the 2 divisional deals based on the come if we go with you. So now you have to be good at what you do for the next year, because if you don't, you're going to lose it. And you have to lock in your pricing on the enterprise while I still have leverage. That's a part of a purchasing person's negotiation plan.
It's so if I'm just trying to process this and paraphrase it.
Yeah, please.
It's a kind of a longer term arrangement. Again, like I said, there's more variables in it. And then what you've done there is, okay, we just stretch time. We can do that. Yeah. And there are bits which we do part each. I said,
time
off the
and
bridge is
volume.
off the bridge. It's yes or no. You're going one way or the other. Whereas it says, well, we can do that now, and then we can look at these other bits later, and we can add these bits in, or we could do. There's more. I think complexity is the right word. And people say, oh, no, it's far more important, the person on the bridge. But we're not using that word for that. But the complex element of all these moving parts and bits and things which that agreement can be made up of, there's more we can play with.
I don't want to say one is more or less complex. I want to say they're different complexities.
Okay.
You have the dynamic of a human, and hey, you got fired. We'll go get another job. Well, you go get another job. I liked my boss. I liked my parking place. That was my life. There's lots of, all of these little things that you have to be very careful of, as or it could be, I hated my boss. Guess what? You don't have to go to work tomorrow. That a-hole that you worked with. The crisis negotiator has to pull this information out before they say the next thing, because they don't want to say the wrong thing, because that's a bad day. And in business, like I mentioned, a 68-page agreement was fairly common. I just got an NDA agreement that's 8 pages long. I've seen them as 1 page long. Mm-hmm. I've seen handshake agreements. And I told them, you win the award for having the most comprehensive NDA I've ever seen. So there's lots of, and there's subtlety in words buried in there. One mistake I made as a negotiator, I was very young. And my first buying job, as a part of the negotiation, I let the supplier take notes, because, taking notes, that's administrative, and you're a supplier, so you take the notes. You've seen those people? I was one of those guys. So in the negotiation, I made a concession. I said they could be a preferred supplier. The contract comes back, we sign it, and they took some liberties with language. They wrote they were the preferred supplier. And I, without paying attention, locked ourselves into a single sole source agreement.
I love this, Mike. I've got this image in my head of this young Mike, and there's this old grizzled salesperson, and you've got one over on him, mate. He's taking the notes. Clever you. Right. I'm already in control here. This guy's good. This is awesome.
Absolutely. So now my side takes the notes, and more importantly, I consider the note taker the second most important role besides the lead negotiator. The note taker frees up the negotiator to actually be in the moment negotiating, and the note taker can take notes, like not just what's said, but hey, when you asked for a concession, Jimmy kind of smiled. Why? Yeah. So now we can go and we can reconvene about what happened, but the note taker is really paying attention and also choosing the right words that are favorable to your side or don't alienate the other side. I have to really trust a person to be my note taker on my own team. It's not just an administrative task that just goes to the junior person. No, I want a more senior person taking the notes.
Yeah. But again, I think in pictures. It's like in a courtroom, isn't it? I mean, you got the guy who stood there, he's doing all the clever speaking and standing and, stuff to the jury, stuff to the judge, an objection. There's somebody sat behind on, like, very, very carefully taking the notes, writing the stuff, processing the information, passing a little post-it. They have a
passing that note.
Yeah. Tugging on the gowns over here, but yeah, tugging on the gowns and yeah.
Hey, can I talk about one thing about planning that came up recently that I thought was really powerful?
Go for it, please. Yeah.
So we had a customer, and we were doing a sales price increase class for them. They measured, and they came back and they said, "Why is it that people who conduct their negotiations on Zoom do better than in person?" And we said, "You mean the other way around, right?" Our natural inclination was people in person would do better They would pick up on more visual cues. If I cross my arms like this, does it mean that I'm closed, or does it mean I'm cold because there's an air vent above? You don't know that because you're not in the room.
Mm.
So we started doing some research and doing some interviews, and here's what we came up with. The people who were conducting interviews in the real world, in person, were creating their negotiation plan, getting it approved by their boss, going to negotiate, but when they got in the room, they would put their plan away in their briefcase, or it was on their iPad off the side. The people who were negotiating in Zoom had the planning, had the approval, started the negotiation, but they had it on a yellow sticky note, and they were putting their plan in front of them.
Yep. Yeah.
So as they were negotiating, their plan was front and center, and they produced a measurably better result. So now what I tell buyers when I coach them, don't you let those sellers get away with having a Zoom call. You want them in the room with you, right? And sellers, I say, listen, I know you want to be in the room. Let me give you something to consider. Maybe you want to go on Zoom, and here's why. Both sides, I say, if you're on Zoom, have your plan out, get it in front of you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're there on Zoom, aren't you? And if you've got the colleagues in, you've also got Slack open, and there's stuff coming in on there, little notes, and the back channel always say this, Fred, do that, Fred. Oh, did you see that? Yeah. Now you're like an Apache pilot, aren't you? Looking at all this stuff. So then you get that software that looks as though you're looking at the camera all the time. Your eyes are all over the place. Like, oh.
Well, and that's why, but see, that's why I think the note taker is so important. It frees the lead negotiator up to just be in the moment negotiating. And it's your second set of eyes that's actually capturing, or should be capturing, all the other stuff. So that instead of watching Slack, the note taker can watch Slack and then tap the lead on the shoulder, or do the little hand raise thing, hey everybody, I need to have a bio break. Is that okay? And then we can go reconvene outside. But the lead doesn't have to, be all over the place. The lead can be focused.
Yeah. And the other thing, I was chatting to someone about the virtual stuff the other day. We're pretty close. Our faces are quite close. I don't think we'd have our faces this close if we were in a meeting room. I don't know. Let's see. When you come over to the UK, let's see. But I would say we might be a little bit uncomfortable. We wouldn't be that close up reading some of the reactions. And yeah, look, I'm looking in different places and stuff, and I think up to the left and to right, or whatever. But you're quite close. You've got a really good
left, right.
Okay,
so but let's do this, right? We can do the camera flip, right? Very easy. So is it really my right or left? So this is what I tell people about reading body language. First of all, it's complicated and can be easily interpreted. But when you're trying to read eye patterns, and if you watch the television, you'll say, their eyes moved, and they'll just pick a certain direction. So of course they were lying. Aha, I caught them. That's for TV. So what I tell people is you have to set a baseline.
Yeah.
And then you do that by saying, hey, Fred, listen, I was, before we get started, I was driving to the store today, and I saw the first car that I had when I was 16 years old. It was a Dodge 024 white. It was amazing. I never thought I'd see one of those again. What was your first car when you were learning to drive? Now I'm going to watch your eyes. Okay. And I watch where your eyes go.
Yeah.
And now I do that a couple of times. And therefore I know when you're probably telling the truth where your eyes go. So now I can measure, hey, Fred, is this the best price you can do? I'm going to watch where your eyes go. And are you telling the truth, or do they go in a different direction? So I say, set a baseline and then figure it out. Now in Zoom, you can do it a little easier because we are a little closer, but make sure I didn't flip my camera back and forth.
Yeah.
So I was doing a session, and there were several speakers. One of them was a facial recognition expert. And she talked about the different muscle groups and things like that. And micro expressions happen within 1/25th of a second. Sometimes you don't even know what you saw. But if you know what you're paying attention to, you can pick up on these things. Here's the problem with Zoom. It's not in high def. I'm filming right now in 1280 or 1080. Zoom knocks everything down to 480.
Mm-hmm.
So and the frame rate is important. So your eyes say, I'm close to Fred, I'm watching Fred, therefore I'm getting clues from Fred. But reality is you're not getting a clue. It's the negative space. So if I don't get the clue because the definition isn't high enough, or the frame rate isn't fast enough, my brain might say, well, since the clue wasn't there, therefore, and then reach an incorrect conclusion because of the camera speed. So we got to be careful, but I think we're down so far down in the weeds. I don't know that there's that many negotiations that I can point to where I used lie detection and body language and things like that to produce the aha outcome of the negotiation. Are there times when people give me bad body language? Absolutely. Are there times when people have slammed the desk? Oh, I got a great one about that. If you want to hear about that.
Oh yeah, go on. We like a desk slam. Definitely like
so
a desk slam.
I telecom company, and it's I won't say it's a commodity, but there's tariff pricing that you can go get, and it's pick up the phone and make phone calls, and we try to commoditize things in purchasing, and it's probably more on the commodity end. So we had our account rep, and we got the best deal from them, and we said, do better. And she said, well, I can't do any better. You have to talk to my director. Great. Who's your director? So we called the director in, and we took super nice guy. And we took from him, and he said, that's it. This is the best deal you can get from me. And, oh, best deal from you? Interesting word choice. Who can we get a better deal from? Well, the vice president of the region. Great. Let's bring we get the vice president of the region.
Oh no.
So we're putting them through the ringer, just making their life miserable, asking them to do better. If you can't do it, your competition can. We had a third party who was compensated based on how low they could get the rates. That was their pricing model. They were getting bonused based on that. So it was really, really tough on this company. And finally, their vice president of sales slammed their hand down on their desk and said, that's the best deal I can possibly do, and walked out of the room. And when they left, I said to the team, well, let me rephrase. I work with them later. They brought me in to teach their sales teams. And he said, Mike, I want to apologize before we even get started negotiation training. I was really rude to you in that one conversation when I slammed my hand on the desk and I said that, but I was really frustrated. And I had to get out of that room. And I said, Richard, let me tell you what we said when you left that room. We didn't say, boy, that Richard, he's a real a-hole. He's really rude. What I said to the team was, okay, we're at the end. We need to make a decision. Because his body language and tone told me authentically we were at the bottom line. He didn't say, Mike, that's the bottom line. I'm checking my plan here. I'm checking with finance, and that's the best we could possibly do. He got emotional, slammed his hand, and left. Now you could try to fake that, but I get lied to all the time. I've got kids. I read in the moment that was authentic frustration. We were at the end, and then we made our decision, and they won the business. So that's one example that I can use on that.
But he was so impressed with the way that you were doing it. You then won the business to train his team.
We did. He was a very data analytical guy, which is maybe why he apologized for being emotional in that particular state. But he brought us in, and he said you just kept going till you got to our bottom line. We still made money on the deal, but it was at our minimal acceptable level, and you guys got a great deal. By the way, we did the negotiated outcome. What I tell purchasing people is, you can focus on price, but you're limiting. So we negotiated a total deal. At the time I was at MGM Resorts, we had them bring us conventions, but we gave them the insider friends and family price on rooms. So they got room rates that they couldn't touch if they were sourcing a convention. We got them in. We got to make money off their food and beverage and everything else. But they then gave that deal to their employees, 50,000 person company. Hey, if you guys are going to Vegas, why don't you go stay at MGM Resorts, and here's your best rate. So we actually expanded it beyond a price-focused commodity negotiation to they got wins out of it for their side. There were different wins than our side, but they got wins out of it. We got wins out of it. And then our employee bases got wins out of it because we allowed our employees to then use the corporate contract for their cell phone rates. So both sides expanded the pie to even their employees on a personal level.
I love that. And that's what we
built a relationship. He called me in later. Yeah.
And that's what I was saying earlier, in that I think, isn't that better use of time and effort, is to work out how to do that stuff, spend time thinking about those variables, what clever, creative, funky stuff can we bring in, rather than, oh, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to hit him with this as a tactic. And because you get a better deal at the end of the day, and everybody does win, and you can get win-win. You can. Yeah. I believe that.
So I negotiated a deal with a marketing company for TableForce. When COVID hit, we reinvented the company. We're rebranding a website, everything like that. Now, I know what happens when somebody hears that I'm a negotiator. They don't look at the not a crisis negotiator. They just go, Mike's a negotiator. Oh, he's going to take advantage of us. He's going to trick us. It's going to be a bad thing when I'm doing the buying, especially. So because I know that, and because marketing is really strategic and important to most companies, and it is to us, I pulled their lead aside in a Zoom session, and I said, listen, here's the deal. If my assumption is correct, you guys are probably apprehensive about negotiating with us because we're a negotiation training company. And he said, we are. And I said, here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think that 5 years from now, we have done such a great job together building a new customer base that TableForce is going to fund a party where all the people on the team go to this party. We're at the Fountain Blue in Miami Beach, and we're going to spend a whole weekend there, congratulating each other, pat each other on the back. Now, for that to happen in 5 years, we have to build in some metrics right now, build in some processes, build in some ways of doing business together so that we want to be friendly and spend time with each other. And by the way, we have to have enough money to put on that event. With that end in mind, let's start negotiating now for a good deal. But my plan was to reduce the anxiety level with somebody that I wanted to have a strategic relationship with and to incent them to do really well so that in selfishness, we would do well too.
Yeah.
Right? I got to get something
Everybody
out of it.
does well in that. Everybody does well in that. That's the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Ah, I love that. Time has flown. I mean, time is another big thing in negotiation, but we can perhaps talk about that another time.
Yes.
Yeah, time's up. I mean, hopefully, I suspect people are listening to this and think, we might need a little bit of Mike's magic with us. Where do people get in touch with you? How do they get in touch?
Hopefully it's fairly simple. We own the domain negotiationtraining.com. This is all we do is negotiation space. We don't do CRM. We don't do sales training. We don't do purchasing training. Negotiation training is what we do. And it's negotiationtraining.com by TableForce is our rebranding. Mike at TableForce is the email address. Link in with me. Love to connect with people. I love to learn, and I love to banter online. I do poke bears sometimes.
You do. It's worth connecting with Mike just for that, to be fair.
I think we can learn from each other, and I can learn from myself and from the other people that are out there. So by all means, connect with me. I'd love to meet more people.
Brilliant. We'll pop those links into the show notes anyway, so people can find them straight away. Oh, brilliant. Awesome conversation, Mike. Thanks,
Fred, thank you for your time.
Taking the time and coming along and doing that.
You got it.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.